What's the most unfair thing you've ever seen? I hung out with a bunch of poor misfits in high school. We all wore hand-me-down clothes and qualified for free lunch at school and lots of single-parent families and government assistance. This one girl in my group complained more than anyone else about how her family was poor. She often didn't have lunch, and so the other kids would all chip in and either give her money or share her own lunches. Two of the kids we hung out with were twin brothers. Their mom was raising them, plus their older brother, all on her own because their dad was incarcerated. He finally got out when we were teens and pretty much immediately ran off and refused to pay support, too. Because of the circumstances, the boys started working to support their family really young. First doing odd jobs for folks and then getting real jobs as soon as they could. The two of them felt so sorry for this girl. They decided to surprise her for Christmas one year. They saved up what they could for months and bought her a brand new game system she'd been complaining about wanting. Meanwhile, she gave a few of us used games and books, obviously previously played or read by her, wrapped in tinfoil instead of gift wrapped, and we all shrugged that off because, of course, she was poor. A couple weeks after that Christmas, the girl's parents decided to let her throw her first small party for her friends at their house. Her dad picked us all up in their brand new minivan and then drove us to their brand new house. After we arrived, we got introduced to her new puppy, and then given the home tour, which included 5 bedrooms and a pool. Also notable was the girl's bedroom where her new game system sat along 2 other recent systems. I found out later that her dad was an attorney, and her mom was a medical assistant. Her parents' combined income was 3 to 4 times what my family made in a year, much less our friends who had worked their heads off to buy her that game system. Her idea of being poor was based on her parents not buying her everything she wanted immediately. The reason she never had lunch money? She saved what her folks gave her to buy herself things instead, while mooching off kids who were on free lunch. The reason she always gave us used stuff as gifts? Because she would have her parents buy a bunch of stuff for her friends at holidays, then keep it for herself while giving us stuff she no longer wanted instead. I'll never forget the look on my friends' faces as they slowly realized that the person they'd worked to support out of sympathy was actually just a spoiled brat. Afterward, we started gradually cutting her off. She flipped her crap and caused a bunch of drama with me, and at that point, I dropped her. Other people continued to let her hang around, but throughout the next year, she continued to screw them over. By the time we finished high school, she had no friends at all. She's now 32 and never did anything useful with her life. I look her up every couple of years, and it seems like her parents are still supporting her while she tries to get strangers on the internet to go fund me her rent, without success. One of the twins sadly passed not long after high school. He had a chronic health issue and probably didn't get as much treatment as he should have. His brother is still around and still the nicest guy. He's doing okay, all things considered. Congratulations! I've never met you in my life. I have no idea what you look like or what your name is, and I don't know who you are, but I am absolutely furious on your behalf. Story 2. My freshman year of college, I got to be extremely close with a girl who was a senior. We did everything together. At the time, I was heavily religious, and so was she. We went to the same cultish church and spent almost all of our waking hours together. She was my best friend, and my duet partner when we lead worship at our university's Christian group. She was stubborn and beautiful, and she loved so deeply and truly. Just an all-around wonderful, intelligent girl. The summer after she graduated, I went through some serious personal crap, and I ended up walking away from church and religion. Because of this, we grew apart. I still saw her, and we were still friends, but the lack of proximity coupled with the loss of what had first bonded us strained things. About a year went by, and I was seeing her less and less. I missed her and her friendship. I reached out, she came over to my dorm, and we spent some time together. We made plans to go see Les Mis in theaters the next week. We never got to go. She'd been having back pain the doctors couldn't figure out, and that week she started having seizures and throwing up too. Because of these issues, she moved back in with her parents. She ended up diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I was never able to afford the trip to be with her when she was sick. I still feel so guilty for not just figuring it out. October will be 4 years since she passed, and I still miss her so much. I'm big on remembering people accurately and not pretending they were perfect just because they're gone. She wasn't perfect, by any means, but she was closer than anyone else I've ever known. It was so unfair for someone like her to not only pass young, but to suffer as horribly as she did. It wasn't fair that I wasn't there for her when she needed me most. The world is truly dimmer without her light. She was a fantastic individual. No one deserves to go like that, but she absolutely didn't. Story 3. When my first dog was put down, I was like 15 or 16. That dog was my best damn friend. My parents had got her as a puppy a few weeks after I was born. We literally grew up together side by side. Like when we were older, she would follow me around everywhere. I didn't have to yell at her to get her to stop barking or to come to me or anything. All I had to do was simply say her name gently and tell her to stop. And that was it. Everyone else? Lol, she refused to listen to anyone but me. I watched her every day and played with her every day. I was the only one that fed her. And at night, she slept with me every day. We did almost everything together. I loved the crap out of her. But one day, she started getting sick. She was getting older, And something about her back, she was a dachshund, was getting worse. I think she had bone cancer or something. Well, I knew it was getting bad, but I didn't know to what extent. And one day while I was at work, my mom called to tell me they had taken her to the vet and that they were probably going to put her down. I told my mom to wait for me to get there, pleading with her and my dad to wait for me. They said they would. I wasn't able to leave work early, and so it was 2 hours before I got to the vet. Well, I got to the vet and they had already put her down. I still don't know why. You have to keep in mind all throughout my childhood and schooling years, I literally had 0 friends. I was always bullied. I had multiple problems with other kids calling me a freak and all that stuff, and I was heavily sheltered, so that didn't help. All I had to look forward to each day was hanging out with my dog. And on that night, I watched the only thing that mattered to me be taken from me without giving the chance to say goodbye. I know that dog knew that I loved her, but still. Story 4. I have a friend who was headed to work when a guy stole a huge gas truck, like one of those that they take out to work on lines with, and got on the highway going the wrong way. There was a police chase that had already involved going through the international airport, nearly hitting a jet, loaded with passengers, at which point I personally believe he should have been treated as a potential hijacker and handled as such. The car was totaled. His wife didn't even get to bury all of him. He was 23, barely. He was 3 months shy of his second anniversary with his wife, with a 1-year-old daughter and 2 stout children who thought he hung the moon. He just finished the trial. He was found guilty, and this was his 8th time with similar charges: evading police, stealing cars, etc., etc. Plus, it was the commission of a felony and DUI situation, so it was first degree. There were a few factors playing into it. He wasn't offered a plea deal because the DA was out for blood. My friend's wife was there all the days of the trial, and he spent the entire time glaring at her, just staring her down entirely and making comments about how her husband was obviously on something and not paying attention because everyone else got out of my way. He completely made it out to be Will's fault that he was gone in such a horrific way at 23. The victim's advocate had to get involved because it was bordering on an aggravation after a while. He also spent a long time in jail whining to my father-in-law about how everyone was being uncool to him. The jail is run by quite a few of the parents of people who knew and loved Will. Being uncool is probably the least of his worries. He did an interview after the trial, where he came off as the victim. It was awful to watch. He even demonized Will's wife by writing a fake letter for the reporter that he claimed she never bothered to respond to. It was never sent to her, at all. The first time she saw it was when I told her about the interview. They didn't even tell her about it. They made her look like the most heartless person, airing a snippet of an interview she did where she stated all that she wanted was for him to show some remorse. And by snippet, I mean she was cut off mid-sentence in the airing, and following it by reading this heartfelt, handwritten letter where he confessed how it haunted him and he wished he could trade his life for Will's. But then he immediately starts in on how it is unfair that he was charged, how he doesn't think he should have to go on parole at 60. He'll be lucky if he gets that. He's looking at life and the only way he's getting parole is if his sentences are ran concurrently rather than consecutively, and how everything thinks he's just a bad guy. But he's not, because he only did it because he had a loved one pass 3 days before, so he had to get baked and steal the truck, even though he had 8 previous charges for similar actions. It was crap. The whole thing still makes me angry. The only time he ever tries to seem remorseful is when the jury or public is watching. The rest of the time he's complaining about how nothing is fair and demonizing the widow whose husband he took away. She still can't go back to work because she was there when they notified her and she relives it over and over whenever she walks through her office. I personally think she has a bit of PTSD because she doesn't like to be separated from any of her family members at all and avoids quite a few things because she just can't handle it. And I don't blame her. She had to identify him. And let me tell you, there was nothing left. And then she had to plan his funeral and explain to his daughter, who had just reached a point of being very attached to her dad, why he wasn't coming home. And then she had to sit through the trial and see the pictures of his body presented to the jury and be told everything that happened to him, exactly how he suffered, in clear detail, while the man who did that to him glared at her and called her names to his attorney, and then demonized her in the press. Important detail I didn't mention, they actually scheduled the trial for the week of their anniversary, and the day was a really gruesome day. She spent what would have been her 3rd anniversary looking at pictures of her husband's body and hearing how he passed while this guy glared at her. And then 2 days later, the interview aired. So yeah, that's probably the most unfair thing I've ever seen. That's brutal. He's a sociopath. It would be a real shame if prison justice got to him. If you agree that it got worse and worse as the story unfolded, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Now let's get back to the video. Story 5. My little brother broke most of my electronic devices, and my parents blamed me and made me pay for everything that my little brother broke. He broke things like my DS, PSP, a TV, a few 360 and PS4 controllers, my PS4, Wii and GameCube, and a spattering of other bits and bobs. I worked for most of this stuff, as I've had odd jobs since I was 8, which allowed me to buy most of these things. One specific thing he broke that I remember being really unfair is my old laptop. I went on a camping trip with friends. Laptop was working, the casing was a little cracked as it was like 2 years old, and I've taken it to college a lot. I came home and the laptop was dead, so I put it on charge. Wouldn't accept a charge whatsoever. I told my parents that it wasn't working and said I was going to try and fix it. I'm not too tech savvy, but I thought I could fix it. I took it to the garage where all the work stuff is and took it apart. My little brother thought it'd be a good idea to come down and play football in the garage. The ball hit a heavy lamp, slammed into the laptop. It bounced off the laptop and tested me in the head, which gave me a black eye and a heavy nosebleed. Red all over the crack or bent motherboard, so my laptop was screwed. I told my parents what happened, showed them the damage, and they blamed me and told me I had to pay them back for the laptop and buy myself a new one. Even though I later found out that it was my little brother that caused the laptop to not be able to charge. He'd messed with the charging port. Then, with the football, he cracked and warped the motherboard because of the lamp. I wasn't able to get him into trouble for it. Overall, my little brother has cost me and my parents about 200 pounds in damages, and he's gotten away with every single thing he's broken. Story 6. I went to a private Baptist college that did not tolerate drinking. The rule before and after that year was if you were caught drinking on campus housing, you were handed a drinking ticket, and that was that. Not this year. I was 21 living in campus housing. Before you say, oh, why didn't you just move off campus? My athletic scholarship covers housing. During fall break, the swim team stayed on campus because we were training for a meet coming up. My roommates and I thought it would be fun to invite people over and just blow off some steam and throw a tiny shindig. Some a-hole noted we had people over, so the RD came and busted us. Sure, I know I had this coming. I was prepared to pay the ticket and end the party. I felt that it was fair for breaking the rules. Oh no, that was not the end of it. The school quietly changed the rules to, if busted, you were immediately expelled from housing pending a hearing. The police were called as well. Soon 3 security guards and a sheriff were standing in my apartment, calling everyone out. The RD said I was going to be charged for providing alcohol to minors as well as the school's punishment. One roommate was hiding her illegal bunny and the other was openly sobbing. I packed an overnight bag because we had to leave immediately. I offered to take the hit, so my roommates weren't screwed too. So within the span of an hour, I went from throwing a party to being evicted. I arranged places for my roommates to stay, but I wasn't anywhere close to where I needed to go. I sat on the curb pondering if I should make the 2-mile walk on the dark country road while the sheriff was in his cruiser writing his report up. The bright side to this story, he ended up sitting next to me and said, "Between you and me, I think you've been punished enough. I'm not going to charge you." He then offered to give me a ride in his cruiser. I acknowledge I broke the rules, but I feel the punishment was grossly unfair. Story 7. Growing up, I had a friend whose family was the worst. I went over there for play dates a lot. One day, a Korean girl who I sort of befriended and helped her with her homework, she was younger than me, followed me to my friend's house. When we saw her come up to the house, the mom shooed her away. She said, "I don't want Chinese people in my house." The girl went home crying her eyes out. I felt terrible for not following and comforting her, but I was 10 years old and didn't know what to do. The worst part is that the mother who insulted the girl blamed me for the incident because she was trying to save face. The Korean family told me they didn't need me to help with their homework anymore. I'm not sure if the girl was too shy or scared to tell the truth, but I never spoke to either of the families again. Well, at least she doesn't have to deal with that crappy prejudice anymore. Who needs people like that? Sad ending for a Korean friend, though. Story 8. When I was in grade school, we had a final group assignment to design a community center, with my teacher promising a lobster dinner for the group that had the highest mark. I had a bit of a crush on my teacher and thought, hey, lobster dinner. My group busted their bums designing the hijinks after school community center, calling a long list of businesses to determine membership fees, cost of construction. We got hung up on a lot looking for price of building materials, community outreach programs, and a whole lot more. We even helped the special needs kid in our group write a jingle, and we got the highest mark. When it came time for our lobster dinner, my group stayed in the classroom during recess to enjoy the fruits of our labor. My teacher brings out our lobster, which is a loaf of bread with googly eyes and paper lobster claws stuck on the side. It was on that day I learned the true meaning of disappointment. Story 9. My mom bought my brother a Sega from a garage sale years after it was a popular gaming system. It didn't change the love my brother had for it. My brother and I routinely took care of ourselves after school as parents were working. One day my dad came home early and was irate that my brother wasn't home. He then proceeded to make me throw his Sega in the dumpster of our complex and told me if I brought it back in, I would be hit with a belt. This was his idea of a punishment towards my brother. In my 8-year-old brain, I obviously didn't want to get hit and did as I was told. The look on my brother's face when he came home and my dad told him what happened to his Sega was just heartbreaking. It still makes me sad when I think about it. I will buy my brother a new Sega. This is certainly going to be his Christmas gift. It's unreal how we remember these instances vividly and how they still impact us. Also, my dad is still a cruel person, and my stories of his behavior are endless. Story 10. A girl who lived down the street from me growing up passed in a car crash. She was really young, hadn't even finished college yet. 2 or 3 years later, her younger sister, who my sister and I used to play with together, passed the exact same way. The only one left is the middle child, their brother. I can tell it has absolutely crushed their family, and I just remember going to the funeral and thinking, why? Why did they have to live through this not once, but twice? That much heartache has to be unbelievable, and it's incredibly unfair. The brother was always a little prick growing up, but man, I wish I could pull him aside now and tell him just how sorry I am that he has to live without his sisters and that if he needs anything, not to hesitate to ask. But I really never knew him well, so he'd probably think that was weird. But I think of him and his family often. I looked him up on social media. Looks like he's actually doing really, really well. Looks very happy, has a girl now, and a good support system. So I feel a bit better. Mostly just wanted to know he was okay. Story 11. When I was 15, we had our Year 10 formal, which is kind of like Australia's homecoming dance or prom, I guess. I wasn't very excited for it, but I was excited for the after party, which was going to be my first high school party. I lived 35 k's from my school and had to take a bus into town every day, and both my parents worked a lot, so I missed a lot of parties. I talked about going to the after party for weeks, but my mother decided to tell me that I couldn't go on the way to the formal because I hadn't organized anything when she knew full well that I had. I was staying at my friend's house that night, and she had the address and the invitation. Also, she told me on the way that I have no chance of organizing anything anyway. Pissed me off, as I had to spend the whole night at something I didn't care about and listen to everyone talk about a party I couldn't go to. This experience taught me to always live up to the promises I make with my kids when I have them. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy. What's the darkest side of humanity you've seen? Story 3 will surprise you. See you on that video.